free means free, libertad, but free is Fundación Rioplatense de Estudios. It's a Uruguayan Argentine think tank. And thank you to both of them for giving CIES UDD the opportunity to organize this event. Thank you, Professor Laffer, and thank you, Francisco Iseta. Where is Francisco? From the Ayata. Thank you from the Free Foundation. As I was thinking about how best to introduce our guest, I wondered what aspect of his remarkable career I should emphasize. And to make things simpler for me, I just asked ChatGPT, who is Arthur Laffer? And the answer was, Arthur Laffer is an American economist best known for developing the Laffer curve, one of the most influential and controversial ideas in modern tax policy. He's a leading advocate of supply-side economics, which argues that lower tax rates and less regulation can stimulate economic growth, investment, and employment. Good summary, right?
Thank you.
Well, but beyond his academic career, Professor Laffer served on President Reagan's Economic Policy Advisory Board from 1981 to 1989, where his ideas helped shape the tax reforms of that era. He also served as an economic advisor to Donald Trump during the 2016 presidential campaign. And in 2019, President Trump awarded Arthur Laffer the Presidential Medal of Freedom, recognizing his contribution to economic thought. Professor Laffer remained highly active, as you can see. Last year, together with several co-authors, he published Prosperity Through Growth, this book. A book that is an examination of what is going wrong in the UK and how to fix it. And one interesting detail that I found reading this book is that, the first sketch of the Laffer curve was drawn in a napkin, but not any napkin, a linen napkin. And you say, this is the picture. And the original is now preserved at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. So it is a piece of history. That is my introduction, Arthur. So now we are going to talk. I will ask you some questions, and then the idea is to talk also with this audience.
Great.
And let me start with the American economy. What are your views on the American economy today? But I need to start before, when you were serving President Reagan. And that was the time when tax cuts were applied, deregulation, the economy grew a lot. But some people say, I want to provoke you, some people say that it didn't work so good because,
You should not have said that. God resides with Ronald Reagan, and anyone says it doesn't work, well, the light's out.
Well, I don't know what happened, but we can hear. And, and the point is that tax collection, tax revenues, did not recover over time, and that implied more deficit and, of course, an increase in national debt. And the reason for my question is that in Chile we are facing a similar discussion because of the project that you know, and we are going to talk about that later. But so let me start about your views on the Reagan time, and then compare with Trump's policy, because they are very different, in my view. And I'm sure most of people in this room, he's not absolutely a free trade man, tariffs, the way he imposes tariffs is the opposite, or was done before. There is a sort of, and light came again. He's following Biden's policies, the Inflation Reduction Act.
It'll go out again if you keep this up.
The CHIPS Act protecting semiconductors. It's a sort of old-fashioned industrial policy. But let's start with Reagan and then you move to Trump.
Can I start with a little comment, if I may? The Laffer curve. I did not invent or discover the Laffer curve, just for the record. It's been around for thousands of years. Every price theorist understands that you can price a good so high you lose money. You can price it so low you lose money. That's the Laffer curve in microeconomics. The only thing that had happened in the 1950s and 60s, they'd forgotten it in macroeconomics. The second thing I want to say very clearly, I did not name it the Laffer curve. That was done by a journalist from the Wall Street Journal named Jude Wanniski, and I am so happy he did it. I love it, love it, love it. But I did not do that. My beginnings in economics really started one administration earlier. I was in the Nixon White House when they formed something called the Office of Management and Budget. I was the chief economist at the Office of Management and Budget. George Shultz was the head of the Office of Management and Budget from Chicago. You may have heard of Chicago. And he was that. So I was the first chief economist in the White House. That's where I learned my economics. Now, let me just tell you, I wrote my mother. My mother was a lovely, wonderful lady. Oh, and I wrote her, I said, Mom, you won't believe it. I just wrote a speech for President Nixon. I wrote a speech for President. He loved it. It was wonderful. In fact, he took my whole speech. He took everything and he only changed 2 words in it. Wherever I said is, he put is not. And wherever I put is not, he put is. And so that was my beginnings with Nixon, which was and really very seriously, the failure of Nixon is a huge thing. You learn a lot more from failures than you do from successes. And the last thing I want to say, starting here, I am coming home now to Bethlehem in the supply side economics model. You were the beginning here of the first true experiment in supply side economics. I started coming to Chile in 1973. I was here first. Then from 76, 77, Rolf, you and Sergio de Castro and all the team. I mean, it was a wonderful, I must have come 10, 15 times down here. Arnold Harberger was, of course, the maestro from Chicago that did it. But it's so nice to be at the beginning, at the center of the revolution. And I love coming back there. Now, let me just do Reagan and the tax cuts and your criticism. Now, don't go out. We had a tax cut in 1981. And this is very relevant to Chile today. We had the tax bill, it's called ERTA, the Economic Recovery Tax Act. And what the ERTA did was it reduced tax rates by about 25%, all right? It shifted the taxes out, it didn't lower rates, it just changed thresholds, but that doesn't matter. But it was a major tax cut. And when it passed, the president called me, it was August 17th or whatever. My birthday is August 14th, we passed the bill on the 14th, he signed it into law, then he called me and he was really enthusiastic about it. He was you know how you spike a football when you win the game? You come up, whoo, whoo, and all the football players spike the field. And he called me and we won, we got it, Arthur. And he could tell I wasn't as enthusiastic as he thought I should be. And he said, what's the matter, Arthur? You're not as enthusiastic. Are you upset with the bill? I said, no, sir. I'm really glad it was passed. I love that you did. He said, are you upset that we didn't get 30% tax cut? We only got 25? And I said, no, I'm amazed you got 25. He said, what's the matter then? You're not going to pour cold water on this, are you? I said, well, sir, one problem. He said, what's that? I said, sir, you phased in the tax cuts. Ugh, you economists are so silly, Arthur. You don't understand politics at all. You can't ask for a congressman to vote for a bill right away that causes these deficits. You've got to ease your way into a tax cut. And I said, well, I understand what you're saying, sir, and I'm very glad it passed, but can I ask you a question? How much would you shop at a store a week before that store has its big pre-announced discount sale? And there was dead silence on the other side, and he said, oh my God, how bad is it going to be, Arthur? And I said, sir, it's going to be a barn burner. If you go to my Barron's interview on the front page of Barron's in December of 1981, you can see me outlining. We had a tax cut of 5% on October 1st, 1981, 10% on July 1st, 1982, and 10% on July 1st, 1983. All of you follow me? That's the 20th. Now, as you know, there is no such thing as an inter-year tax cut. There can't be. When you pay your taxes at the end of the year, you tell them how much did you earn during the year, and you pay it against one tax schedule, right? So instead of being a 5% cut on October 1st, what the IRS did was they prorated that over the whole year. So the actual tax cut in 1981 was 1.25%. 5% for 1 quarter of a year, okay? On January 1st, 1982, we got the full 5% from 81, and we got half of the 10% from 82. So in 82, the tax cut was total 10% across the board. And on January 1st, 1983, the tax cut on one day went from 10% cut to a 20% cut. It has always amazed me how tax cuts don't work until they take effect. And then they really work. We phased in the tax cut. We caused the deep recession of 81, 82. How much would you earn if you knew they were going to cut tax rates next year? You'd defer all the income you possibly could, and you'd accelerate all the expenses you possibly could is what you'd do. We had a deep recession in 1981, 82 because of the phase-in of the tax cuts. That's what it was. On January 1st, 1983, that day when the 20% tax rate came into effect, the economy of the United States jumped like a jackrabbit. From January 1st, 1983 to June 30th, 1984, in a year and a half, 18 months, all right, 6 quarters, U.S. real GDP grew by 12% at an 8% per annum compound rate. Chinese growth rates. Reagan was elected in a landslide victory in 1984. All right, that's what happened with the tax cuts. That is the big problem we had. Once they were in place, the sky was the limit, heaven was our goal, and we achieved it.
But what is your answer to the critics of the fiscal deficit, the increase in national debt?
Well, let me do the increasing national debt. What's wrong with the national debt? What's wrong with debt? I mean, when you look at it, let me, if I can, do United States today, if I may, the debt, and just discuss it with you. And you're all economists, so forgive me for being boring and dull. But let me just say that debt is an instrument. Debt is something that you give savers to get the money to become an investor. It's just a transfer of resources from one group to another. National debt is no different from that. National debt takes money from savers and it transfers it to investors. Now, when you look at this, what happens is the key to debt is the spread. You know, let me ask you, I'm going to lend you all you want for 1% charge, and I'm going to let you invest all you want at 12% guaranteed. How much would you borrow? As much as you could get. Now, reverse those two numbers. I'm going to let you borrow all you want at 12% and let you invest all you want at 1%. How much would you borrow? 0. It's the spread that matters. And that is the key. Now, when we took office on January 20th, 1981, we had 4 predecessors who destroyed my country. I call them the Four Stooges. It was Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter, the largest assemblage of bipartisan ignorance ever put on planet Earth. And when we took over the economy, we found the American economy in shambles. We dug into the rubble, and we pulled out this little platinum plaque and polished it in our jacket and put it up and said, USA Inc., America. And what did we do? We borrowed lots and lots and lots of money. We did. We ran big deficits. And what did we do with that money? We cut taxes dramatically. We deregulated the economy. We put in sound money. We built the defense of the United States, and then we sat back and prayed that it would work. If you look at the results, it did work. Look at the period of Reagan. We invested wisely at a borrowing cost, and we had a much higher rate of return on the investment. That's all it is. It's just common business sense is what we did, and we rebuilt America. Then we came along to, I'm not a Bush fan, so forgive me. We had 4 years with George Herbert Walker Bush, sorry. But then we had Bill Clinton. I voted for Clinton twice. I thought he was great as a president. I never would let my daughter intern in that way. But he was a great president. And what did Bill Clinton do? You know, when you're poor and you have great investment opportunities, you borrow. But when you're rich and you've got all the money there is, you pay back the debt. And what did Clinton do in his 8 years of office? He paid back the debt. He cut taxes. We eliminated the capital gains tax on owner-occupied homes. We did all that stuff. It was great. We welfare reform. Oh, Clinton was a great president. I voted for him twice. I would have voted for him 4 times, but I'm not a Democrat, as you probably know. So I couldn't vote in that primary. But we had 4. That is the way it should be done. I'm very proud of the debt we had under Reagan, and I'm very proud of the fact that we paid it off under Clinton. We did just what any common sense person would do in their lifetime. Is we borrowed because the returns we could invest in were much higher than the borrowing costs. We created the prosperity. Now you take people like W, or like Obama, or like Joe Biden, any of these. What did they do? They borrowed lots and lots of money, and what did they use it for? They used it to pay people not to work. That's not a very smart use of debt. Now Trump coming in, Trump has used it to create growth. He's done, I think, a good job on that. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is great. We cut the corporate rate. I mean, let me go through Reagan with you, just one last thing. It just for you people to see what modesty and slow actions really is. We cut the highest tax rate in America from 70% to 28%. Is that okay? Was that big enough for you? Really? Are you all right with that? Is that fair? I mean, we did that. We cut the corporate rate from 46% to 34%. That good enough cut for you there? I mean, there. We got rid of 14 tax brackets and made it 2 tax brackets. We reduced the highest rate from 70% to 28%. We increased the lowest rate from 12.5% to 15%. We got rid of massive amounts of deductions, exemptions, exclusions, omissions, write-offs, all this credits, all that garbage. We got rid of it all. We were going towards a low rate, broad-based, flat tax. And what happened to the U.S. economy? We had to look down to see heaven. We had gone so high in the sky. It was just wonderful. You know, this is the way you run it. And I hope these examples have some impact on you. But be very, very careful of phase-ins. I'm just warning you. Business people are much smarter than politicians, and they're much smarter than professors. We study business people to understand economics. We study them. They do it right, and we try to figure out how they did it. Make sure you understand that they're smarter than you are, and the more stuff you have there, the more they'll do. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes, but now let's go to President Trump.
Let's go to President
What do you
Trump.
think about his trade policy?
Well, everyone wants to get me to say something nasty about Donald Trump. I have known him for years and years and years. In fact, at Chicago, we had something called the General Electric program when I first joined the faculty. which is in 65, 66. And I was on the beginning faculty of the GE, General Electric, adopts people, individuals from the very birth, effectively, and never lets them go. They adopted me then in 1966 and funded me and helped me to this very day. All right, GE does that. They did it with Leon Cooperman, the hedge fund person. They did it with Jerry Parsky with Aurora Capital. They did it with Roy Disney with Disneyland. They did it with Peter Uberoth and the hotels, and they did it with Donald Trump and his casinos and things, and me. So I have known Donald Trump at fundraisers and all this, never well, but never I sat down to talk, but I've known him for a long, long, long time and seen how he operates. There, in fact, when he opened Jean Georges in New York, he poured me a glass of champagne. You know, it was fun. There, when you look at Donald Trump, and I'll tell you the story of, I've known him, I didn't know him well, but I've watched him, and I called Jack Welch, who was the head of GE, and I said, Jack, could you please tell me about this Donald Trump? I've known him, I've been with him, with you, and a lot of times, but never well. And could you tell me, what is it? Arthur, I don't know how he's going to be as a politician. I don't. But I'll tell you, he's the best single business partner General Electric has ever had. We would do business with him every day of the week and twice on Sunday. He's the single best partner General Electric has ever had. That is a very high recommendation. Now, the way I judge a president or any administration is I look at the 5 kingdoms in macroeconomics. I look at the 5 kingdoms. If you get your macroeconomic textbook out, the first section is taxation. Second section is government spending. Third section is monetary policy. Fourth section is regulatory policy. And fifth section is trade. Those are the free mayor. And supply side economics applies to all 5 kingdoms. In Chile, down there in the olden days, Rolf, if you'll remember, we also had a 6th section, which is privatization, selling off all the nationalized companies. The U.S. doesn't really have that problem, but with Thatcher, with Jeffrey Howe and Keith Joseph and all that, we had the privatization in Britain as well. So I look at taxes. Trump has cut the highest tax rate on corporations from 35% to 21%, not too bad. 100% expensing. We got lowered the death tax dramatically in the U.S., which is a killer. When you're old, the death tax really matters. I look at my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and I ask myself, why do I work? And then I look at their pictures and I say, I know why I work, for them. And that's my incentive. And he did that. He got rid of the mandate on Obamacare, the tax on Obamacare. He had all of these things. He took the personal income tax rate down from 39.6 to 37. It was a great tax bill, and it worked wonders there. He also had a problem with the monetary policy, but it was a lot better under Trump 1 than it was under the predecessors, much better. If you look at spending, we increased defense spending. We became, once again, secure as a nation. I loved it. Deregulation, he completely got rid of the energy controls. He put through price transparency on healthcare to reform the whole industry there. 20% of GDP is monopolized by medical workers, medical companies. It's horrible what they've done. We put through price transparency and executive order. Now trade. And let's just talk trade. You all know I'm a trade economist. I did my PhD at Stanford in pure trade theory and money. I came to Chicago because I wanted to work with Bob Mundell, who was trade person all the way. I didn't care. I got offers from all. I wanted to go just to Chicago because of trade and Mundell. I went there, and Harberger, by the way. And Harberger was a big hero of mine early. I went there, and if you look at trade, I am an unadulterated free trader. I believe in free trade totally, with a couple of exceptions. I would not be willing to sell nuclear weapons to Kim Jong-un. Am I wrong on that? Now, I'm a protectionist then? Does that make me a protectionist? If I don't sell nuclear weapons to Kim Jong-un? No. You know, trade is a way to get the gains from trade. There are 2 types of gains from trade. One is called the Ricardian gains from trade. You all know that. We make some things more efficiently and better than foreigners. They make some things more efficiently and better than we do. We and they would be foolish in the extreme if we didn't sell them those products we're more efficiently at producing in exchange for those products that they're more efficiently at producing. You with me? That's just David Ricardo. Gains from trade, comparative advantage, all of that. All right? There's another major gains from trade that comes in, which is called the Alexander gains from trade. And the Alexander gains from trade have not so much to do with products, but have to do with savings and investment. Some countries that have excess savings and very few investment opportunities, they have a surplus of savings. There are some countries that have enormous opportunities for investment and not much savings, and they have huge need for capital. So it makes all the sense in the world that the savings-rich countries would export net to the investment-rich countries, so we could have an allocation of capital in the globe to maximize economic growth and the returns to savings. You all with me on this? Please. You know, from 1640 until 1870, the U.S. ran trade deficits, capital surpluses, ran capital surpluses every single year in that 130-year period, with 7 exceptions. That we ran 123 years of trade deficits and 7 years of trade surpluses, little ones there. And of course, you can guess what those 7 years were. 1776 and 1777, for some reason, I don't know why, Britain would not export to us. That was our revolution. Then the next time they attacked us was 1811, 1812. They attacked us, burned down our capital and all that. They wouldn't export us then either. And then we had the bond collapse where all the investors were British, and we defaulted on all the interest on all the bonds. Every state did, and half the states defaulted on the interest on the bonds themselves. We had the collapse from 1842, 43, 44. Rothschild said to America, "You'll never get another penny from us." Well, 3 years later, they were back investing in us. Those were the 7 years. We built the United States on trade deficits, on capital surpluses. We brought in capital from the rest of the world into the United States. We combined it with our labor and our natural resources, and we became the preeminent economic force on planet Earth through that. So, am I a free trader? You'd better believe it. I am. Now, if you look at the 5 trade deals that Donald Trump did in his first term, there were 5. You may remember we did the South Korea deal. We did the Japanese deal. We did the Brazilian deal and the Colombian deal. And we also had a big one for us, the USMCA, US, Mexico, and Canada deals. Those were 5 major trade deals. Look at all 5 of those, and you tell me if they're not pro-free trade. They are. But now there's something new that has come along in this world for the United States. And this is really important here, especially for Chile. Historically, the way we changed tariffs and quotas and all sorts of restrictions on trade had to be done through the legislature. It had to be passed by the House, passed by the Senate, signed into law by the President. The worst thing that ever happened was the Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930. It had been in the legislature, the protectionist bill. It was finally passed by the Senate and the House in the 4th quarter of 1929. Stock market fell by 35% that quarter. It was then signed into law in June of 1930 by Herbert Hoover, and it led to the Great Depression. My colleague, my mentor, the economist I most respect on earth, Bob Mundell, said in his Nobel laureate speech, he said, the Smoot-Hawley tariff caused the Great Depression, and the Great Depression caused World War II. There's not much worse that you can do in this world than do that. That's true. But when you look at it today, we can change trade legislation with executive orders. I can raise tariffs on you tomorrow, Rolf. I can cut them on you day after tomorrow and then go back and cut them on him and raise them on you and change it all the time. It's much more flexible now than it ever was before. It can be reversed. It can be done, number one. Number two, there's a new thing that's come in the U.S., and it's relatively recent. It's called reciprocity. Before and during World War II, the United States was very, very fortunate not to be in the midst of the war. So we ran trade deficits with all these other countries to provide them with capital, etc. After the war, we did all we could to rebuild those countries. My father was on War Production Board. We owned companies in Japan, in Germany, and Britain, all over the world. My family did, as part of the building back up of the world economy. We allowed countries to put in tariffs and restrictions, protectionist things that shouldn't be done in a normal time period, just to allow them to develop. And during that whole period, we allowed all of these protectionist measures to be put against U.S. products without retaliating. And then, as the world grew rich and big, those tariffs and those quotas and those restrictions still exist. Non-tariff barriers, all of that. So when you looked at 2017 in the U.S. was by far the freest trade large country in the world. All right? There was no reciprocity whatsoever. These other countries didn't cut their tariffs at all. So that's a new position in the world economy, where the U.S. is the freest trade country. Now, I'm not talking about Jersey, Guernsey, Sark, or the Isle of Man, or Monaco, or some Hong Kongs. But we were the freest trade nation in the country. So that's number two. We had flexibility in thing, and we had reciprocity. And the last thing that was very different on trade is we had leverage. And the way I like to describe leverage is, imagine two countries in the world, the U.S. and Puerto Rico. Imagine those are the only two countries in the world. U.S. is 99% of the world, Puerto Rico is 1% of the world. Imagine it's completely free trade. Puerto Rican exports are U.S. imports, U.S. exports are Puerto Rican imports, the trade deficit in Puerto Rico is the trade surplus in the U.S. Everything is perfectly aligned. And all of a sudden, the American government puts on a protectionist measure on trade. What happens? Well, everyone is worse off. You know, trade protectionism hurts everyone. But when you look at the damage it did for Americans, any American company, 99% of its customers are Americans. Only 1% are Puerto Rican. But in Puerto Rico, 99% of its customers are American, and only 1% are Puerto Rican. The effects on Puerto Rico are much larger damaging than they are on the U.S. There's a leverage there. Now, Donald Trump, as President of the United States, is not a trade economist, but he understands he wants to deal in the world economy with other countries. How does he make it so that other countries pay attention to his wishes? And we can use the State Department, wah, 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 wah. Or we can use the Department of War. We can do that. Or we can use trade tools. And Donald Trump believes that trade tools are very effective in dealing with other countries. And he understands, believe me, I've spoken to him about it a number of times, he understands the dangers of protectionism, the Smoot-Hawley tariff, the Nixon. I was in the White House when Nixon did Camp David. That's my mom's speech, if you'll remember. That's not the thing to do. Do everything else, not that. But I was there. I saw how protectionism hurts. We did NAFTA under Reagan. We did the Kennedy round tariff negotiation under John F. Kennedy. It created great prosperity. Donald Trump is aware of all of this, and he finds that the use of tariffs and quotas and restrictions very helpful in his negotiations for all sorts of other things in the world. I watch it carefully. It scares me very much what he does. I'm always on edge, but I have never seen him cross the line, not yet, in the U.S. in these negotiations. He has not done a Smoot-Hawley tariff. He has not done a Nixon Camp David. He has not. And he's tried to use these tariffs and quotas and restrictions to secure a solution in Ukraine, a solution in Iran, all of these. He uses them as international tools to effectuate other policies. Am I a free trader? You're darn right I am. But also, do I think this man knows how to use tools to get things in the world? Yes. When he does do a trade deal, they are always freer trade. So I hope
Chile has a free trade agreement signed with the U.S. It is in place, but as you may be aware of, President Trump raised tariffs to Chile in 12.5%.
Yeah, and he'll reduce them again.
So you are a good friend of him. So tell him that
Good now.
we do not deserve that.
Yeah. Let me just say, good friend of Donald Trump's is a funny word. Even if you were his mother, I would worry. Donald Trump, I beg you on this, and this is me just talking about Donald Trump. Take Donald Trump very seriously, but not literally. He talks in a different language. He has the same background my family does. I'm Scots, Irish, German. I have been a successful family, Yale for 4 or 5 generations, privileged, prep school, all of that. Donald Trump comes from that background as well. Remember, a person he has no lack of self-confidence. None. And he has no reason to be shy. Oh, sorry. Oh. No, that's not Donald Trump. Now, in my group, in my prep school, in my Yale College and all that, there were a few people in my group who were like Donald Trump. None of them so much. He believes he's invincible. And he does the best job he possibly can. He doesn't wait for years and what do we do? Let's do it. It's done. And I had one in there. I told him about the hospital. I was chairman of the board of Centennial Hospital in Nashville, and I looked at all the price rigging and everything the healthcare does and how bad it was. I explained it to him. The next day he asked me, I need an executive order next week to undo all of it. He sees a problem, he solves it. Now, when he sees that he's done something wrong, he takes it back. He loves Chile, okay? He loves Argentina. He now loves Bolivia. He loves El Salvador. He very shortly, he now loves even Venezuela, and tomorrow he'll probably love Cuba. Just for the record, this is Donald Trump. You got to learn to deal with him. What I hope happens on all of this is that by the time he leaves office, the Supreme Court will outlaw everything he did during his term, and so that no president ever again in the future can use trade as a negotiation tool. But as long as it's in his hands, I feel very comfortable that it will be done correctly for the benefit of the world. Is that?
No, okay.
Is that enough for you? I mean, you see my argument? I needed to go through that slowly with you. The gains from trade, we all know. You're all business people, economists. You know the Ricardian and the Alexander gains from trade, and we all know how important they are. The Kennedy round trade deal led to incredible prosperity in the world. NAFTA was just spectacular. We all understand, but we all understand negotiations on a global scale. We all understand Ukraine. We all understand that he solved 4 wars in Africa, for God's sakes, wherever they were. I mean, this is a guy who meddles in everyone else's country's affairs. If you're going to develop nuclear weapons, don't tell Donald Trump. Okay? You'll find it surprising what happens.
Well, time is running.
So I'm sorry.
I have more questions, but
sure.
I want to go to the audience. But the very last question. After this meeting, you will meet Minister Quiroz with some government officials. You know what is the project in Chile. You are being informed. So if he asks a recommendation, what would you tell him?
Just what I told you. Look, I'm not Chilean. I love Chile. I mean, you're one of my favorite countries on all earth, and I really mean that. I cut my teeth down here on supply side economics. You're the first real example of it, and it worked. Wow. So I love you dearly, but I'm not Chilean. Tomorrow, I'm going home, and I'm an American. And what you do is your affairs as far as I can. If I have anything in my experiential base, what I've done in my whole life, that can help you do a better job in your country, please use it. If you don't like what I say, send me home. I'm fine. I'll go back up to Kentucky with my dogs in the mountains, the Appalachians, and be very, very comfortable. So I'm here to offer you whatever I have to offer you. If you like it, great, use it. If you don't, I'm going home tomorrow. So
now I'm going to offer microphones. Klaus.
Great talk, Professor Laffer.
Thank you.
All my admiration. In the discussion of the tax reform, which was just approved to 98% of it by Congress last week, the tax reform, as you perfectly know, reduced corporate taxes gradually over 2 years by 4 percentage points from 27 to a final 23%. Now, one dimension of this is that although we are not yet at the maximum of your curve in terms of revenue, rates are pretty high. And then taking your curve and combining it with the nonlinear effects on growth of tax reductions, there are two things which escape a little bit of public discussion, which are the nonlinearities of your curve and the nonlinearity of the investment response to tax rates. In other words, starting from 27 and going down to 23% has little effects in terms of sacrificing fiscal revenue, and significant effects, non-linearly higher effects than if you were starting at 15% or 12% and 10%. We discussed this at length at the Ministry of Finance over the last 3 months. It's not part of the public projections, which are all linear and therefore do not account for these wonderful effects, which, I repeat, imply a low sacrifice in terms of fiscal revenue and a non-linearly high effect on the investment response. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I love the way you pose the question. I love the way you think. And no, I really do. And
And he's not
are
a
you
Chicago boy, he's an MIT boy.
Oh, I take it all back. Just
There's enough of the Chicago boys, but here are some MIT boys or Harvard. And remember, MIT is higher on every scale in economics over the last 40 years.
You better be careful; those lights will go out again. No, I do really like the way you think. It's very good. When you look at the Laffer curve, let me just take the model you're talking about, the nonlinear, the linear, and all. That is the right way to think. The Laffer curve itself is a pedagogic device. It is not a literal tool. It's to illustrate the two effects tax rates have on revenues. The one effect, of course, is what we call the arithmetic effect, which if you raise tax rates, you collect more money per dollar of tax base. The second effect is what we call the economic effect, which by raising the tax rates on it, you reduce the tax base. These two effects always oppose each other, okay, throughout the whole thing. Now, it says nothing whatsoever about what comes in the middle. Why do they do it? Do they reduce the tax base because they do less of it? In other words, you lose labor, output, employment, production? Or they do less of it because all the producers leave and go to another country? Or do they lose it because they change the composition of their production to lower tax? Or does it reduce it because they hire lawyers, accountants, deferred income specialists, favor grabbers, lobbyists? They buy off politicians. I know that does not happen in Chile, but it does in the U.S. And so it's just a relationship between one thing and another without any regard for what it is that reduces the tax base, okay, on that relationship. Now, when you look at it about the nonlinearity, one portion of tax theory that's really important is the higher tax rates are, the more likely it is a tax cut will increase revenues. Let me give you an example. Let's imagine we have a tax rate of 99% on someone. Okay? If we lower that rate from 99% to 98%, how much does that statically reduce revenues? Very, very little. All right? But what does it do to incentives to produce? The guy would, before every dollar he earned, he kept 1 cent. Now he keeps 2 cents. We've doubled the incentive to produce, and we've had almost no impact on the revenues. At very high tax rates, the most likelihood increases the likelihood that the tax cuts will pay for themselves and even lead to surplus. That's why every single time in the United States, every single time we've raised tax rate on the rich, by the way, you read my book, Taxes Have Consequences, which is the complete history of the U.S. income tax. Every time we've raised tax rates on the top 1% of income earners in the U.S., three things have happened. The economy has underperformed. Tax revenues from the rich have gone down, not up, every time. And the poor have been hammered. Every time we've cut tax rates on the rich, every single time, the economy has outperformed, tax revenues from the rich have gone way up, and the poor have had opportunities to grow and earn income and prosper. That is the record. So therefore, the higher tax rates are, the more likely it is, and that's why you said from 27 to 23, as opposed to 10 or 15 down. That's there. But do remember, when you have tax rates of 98%, it's even more so. All right? You make your own list there. The second thing is, on the Laffer curve, that's important for your discussion, is the larger the tax base, the more likely it is that tax revenues will not increase by a tax cut. The smaller the base, the more likely it is that a tax cut will lead to increase in revenues. Now that's why when I look at, and by the way, this is just pedagogic, and the third one I'm going to come to in a second because it's really important for you. That's why when I look at corporate taxes, I don't like corporate taxes. When you look at corporations, why on earth would you ever want to tax companies that make wonderful products at low cost and eschew the use of lawyers and accountants, and they make lots and lots of profits, and we tax the living bejeebers out of them? You then get a company that makes a lousy product no one wants. They spend a lot of money doing it. They hire all these lawyers and lobbyists, and you subsidize them. You know, there is no argument in corporations or businesses for redistribution. Why you would tax successful companies and subsidize unsuccessful companies is, to me, crazy. Now, we do it in the U.S. too, so it's not just you. But so therefore, I would never have a corporate tax ever. I would have a flat value-added tax, and I would have a zero corporate income tax, period. That's, you follow me on that? Thank you. The third one I want to go through with you on the pedagogic device of the Laffer curve is time. Let me imagine for a moment, I just built a factory. There's a 10% tax rate, and I build this factory. It's taken me 2 years to build it. It's a beautiful factory. We put the last brick in, we solder it, we open the door for business, and all those politicians, what did they do? That day, they changed the 10% tax rate to 90%. What do I do? Do I tear down the building that I just built? No, of course not. I still make 10%, but when something goes into disrepair or depreciates, do I replace it? No. It takes a long, long time to build a capital stock, and it takes a long, long time to destroy it. The longer you're willing to wait, the more likely it is you're in the prohibitive range of the Laffer curve. The shorter your time horizon, the more likely it is you're in the normal range of the Laffer curve. So, higher tax rates, all right, longer time periods, and larger tax bases, smaller tax bases are your prime there. I would use those considerations, and we have all sorts of data. Let me, if I can, I love your question, because this is the essence. And remember, I'm an American. I'm not Chilean. I don't know your laws well. I don't know the politics. I just love you. And that's true. I really just love you. You've been so kind to me and my family. I mean, really have. But when I look at all these things, I look at politicians and all of this stuff, and it scares me to see them, because they act on words, not on data. And in my opinion, blah, 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 blah. You hear them say that. The three words I hate in the English language the most are "in my opinion." The three words I hate in German the most, we're having the German-Chilean group, "nach meiner Meinung." Bad set of words. In French, if you like French, it's "à mon avis." Those are the 3 worst words in any language in the world. This is not about opinions. I don't give a damn what your opinion is. This is about facts, not how you feel. All right? And get these feelings out of there. What works, what doesn't work. And I would please base all of my policies on facts and only facts. You have an obligation, forgive me as an American lecturing you on this, but you have an obligation to guide and oversee the Chilean population and to do the best job you possibly can. Make sure you do it based on facts. Now, when you look at the U.S., the facts are, you can see them all. But do it here. Nonlinearity. It may be nonlinear. Most likely it is. The chance of it being exactly linear is really small. But how do you know that? Where's your data? Where are the numbers? Not some professor's opinion sitting there in a classroom with a piece of chalk. I'm sorry, MIT notwithstanding. So you need to base all these on facts. Now, what are the facts about taxes? And you brought in taxes, you've all done. All taxes are bad. Some are worse than others. What you want to do is collect the requisite revenues you need to run government in the least damaging fashion. Now, there are some taxes that we have, like sin taxes, speeding tickets, and smoking tax, and a couple of others that are sin taxes. They're different. But in this way, what you want to do is the least damage. And you need to know, if you know Mirrlees, the economist and all that, you need to know everyone's individual supply function and excess demand function. Oh my God, I don't know what. Mirrlees was wonderful, ticky-talker, didn't have any practical policy implications whatsoever. The way you do it is you have the lowest possible tax rate on the broadest possible tax base. So you provide people with the least incentives to evade, avoid, or otherwise not report taxable income, and you have the broadest tax base. You get rid of all the deductions, exemptions, exclusions, credits, write-offs, omissions, all that garbage. You have the broadest tax base, so people have the least places to where they can stick their money to avoid paying taxes. So that's your North Star. So if I were in your assembly with you, you and I, MIT and Chicago, and a little Stanford and a little Yale here too, by the way, but we would sit down and say, how does that move us towards that North Star? Does it move us towards it, away from? Of course you have to understand politics, and you should never be so pure that you'll never vote for anything other than the right. Of course you understand it, but that's the way you go about the tax policies. So when I look at countries' tax policies, that's what I start with. I then look at spending. You know, hopefully all spending is good. And there's some things the government does really well. Judiciary, defense, highways, school, healthcare. There are lots of things government, but there are lots of things it does badly. And so what you want to do on government spending is when the last dollar of money spent, the benefits from the last dollar spent is beep, 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 higher than the damage done from the last dollar of taxes collected, you stop already. That's the limit of government. Anything larger than that's too large. Anything smaller than that's too smaller. That's the optimal size of government. In 1910, total federal taxes as a share of GDP in the United States was total 3%. I don't know if you're aware, it's a little higher than that now. Monetary policy. You want a stable currency. That's why we put in fixed exchange rates in Chile in the revolution. That's why we did. Milton Friedman wants to have money supply control. No. We put in fixed rates so we get stability of the Chilean currency. That's right. You want to have stable currency. Unhinged paper currencies can bring an economy to its knees overnight. Inflation can. So you want that. Sound money. Low rate, broad-based flat tax. Spending restraint. Regulations. We all know we need regulations. Everyone understands that. You can't wake up one morning and drive on the left-hand side of the road and the next day I want right-hand side. No, you can't do that. You need regulations. But you want to make sure that those regulations don't go beyond the specific purposes at hand and create a lot of collateral damage in the overall system. Ronald Coase understood this stuff well. Chicago boy. And then lastly, you want free trade. We've discussed that. Those are the 5 pillars of prosperity. If you keep your eye on that ball all the time, I think you'll do really well.
Okay, thank you. Another questions? Who else?
See, he didn't understand that asking me a question gives me a chance to long answer.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a question about this idea of gradual implementation of the corporate tax rates. So, corporate investment is an intertemporal problem. You build a factory, as in your you said in your example, and then you get after-tax cash flows in 1 year, 2 years, 3, 4 years, etc. The decision to implement that investment opportunity is if and only if the present value of the after-tax cash flows exceeds the initial investment.
Exactly right.
So even if there is a gradual implementation or phase-in, as you said, of the tax rate, that still increases the present value of the after-tax cash flows. Shouldn't that by itself stimulate investment? So what's the problem of the phasing?
Well,
I still don't see it. Disclosure, I am a professor, not a businessman.
A professor, I love it because I too was a professor and I've never been a businessman. If any of you saw my investment skills, you would leave the room right away. I have lost money every time, sometimes even before the check, my signature on the check has dried. So don't trust me. And well, I'll love your question and get preference. So let's delay the tax cut for 50 years. You still going to build that factory? After cash flow is improved. How about 100 years? How about 5 years? You know, my view of this stuff is, do you trust them to do the 3rd year of the tax cut? 100%? If they haven't done it, there's a risk that they won't do it. So when you look out there, it's like smoking to me. You don't quit smoking by stopping 1 cigarette a month. If smoking is bad for you, get rid of it now and quit. If a lower corporate tax rate is good for the country, why wait? Do it now. If it leads to a deficit, it's the right type of deficit. It's the one we did.
Because of political constraint, not economic reasons.
But I'm an economist here, and you know I've worked with a lot of politicians, and some of them I've gotten it right with, and some not. But all of it there, I mean, but I'm just telling you, the more you phase it in, as I told you about Reagan's comment to me, when he said, Arthur, you've just caused the Great Recession of 81, 82. I mean, you really did. Now we got through it, and it worked out. But don't you wish we hadn't gone through it? I would do now this is not to have anything to do with Chile. If I were in the United States and this were proposed, I'd cut the corporate tax right away. And in fact, I probably would get rid of the corporate tax and put it into the value-added tax. It's probably but you do have politics, and this is a hell of a lot better than doing nothing. If I had that bill on my desk and I were a congressman or senator, I'd vote for it. All right? It's just that I would vote faster for it if it were done quicker. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Carlos.
A quick observation with respect to what Mauricio just said. I think this is connected to the option theory of Dixit and Pindyck, which means that the option to wait has value. And I think this is the case in what you said. It's connected to that.
It is. It totally is. And what's the option value? And where does that option value come in? And where do you have your data? I don't want you to just tell me as a professor you know what's better for business people than they do. Don't. That's the arrogance of being a professor. And you know that. And, but what is the optionality value? Exactly that question is the right question to ask. And it's not obvious to me that it's there. For quitting smoking, it's not there. Every day you smoke, raises your probability that you'll have a bad disease. So if you're going to stop smoking, do it now.
Thank you.
Don't be
Well,
shy.
I have Christian, the founding father.
Yes.
As you know, you explained us how free trade has been in the United States for many years. But let me say to you that starting in the period of the Chicago Boys, Chile became perhaps much more free trade than the US.
Yes.
Thanks to that, we have today two main partners. China, 50% of our exports. United States, if you combine the influence of the country through exports and through foreign investment, is the other part, another 50%.
Yeah.
You know Mr. Donald Trump. You know what he is doing. What he is doing is much worse than what he did in Trump #1. And we have a big problem.
Yeah.
What is your recommendation?
Yeah.
And your recommendation in terms of coming from a citizens
Yeah.
of the United States, friend of Chile.
Yeah. I'm going to, the situation he faced in Trump 2 is different than Trump 1. The Ukraine war began the day he left office under Biden, and it's there now. You have the Iran situation, and I'm not making excuses for him and all that. Let me talk about China a little bit. And China to me is very important. I was the first American in modern time to go to China. I went in October of 1970 within the White House. I went with George Shultz and John Ehrlichman in Air Force Two. We did the pre-Kissinger trip. I stepped into the new territories and pulled my foot back. I was the first one. I went to China. I'm a Midwestern American boy, and I don't like them. The Korean War, all of that stuff, and I fell in love with China the moment I was there. I adore China. China is one of the most amazing miracle countries on earth. When I went to China, they were the poorest nation on earth per capita, by far. That was in 1970. 2015, 2020, they were one of the most prosperous nations on earth, challenging the U.S. When I went to China in 1970, I think it was 96% of all Chinese production went through state-run enterprises. Today, 10% does. That's called a tax cut. In 1970, China had no trade with the rest of the world. Today, China is the biggest trading nation ever. That's free trade. In 1992, China pegged the yuan, the renminbi, with the US dollar. They outsourced monetary policy to Alan Greenspan. In 1992, and Chinese inflation like this, stabilized interest rates. I mean, they are the prime example of supply-side economics the world has ever seen. If it's only maybe Chile is the better example. I mean, it's just amazing what they did. They removed more people from poverty than the entire history of humanity. From 190,000 years ago with Eve to today, they've done a great job. I am a huge fan of China, and I'm a huge fan of the U.S. free trading with China. I'm very worried about Xi. I think Xi has reversed those policies. The trouble with the communist state is they can change their policies overnight. Xi is coming after Jack Ma. He's throwing whatchamacallit in prison. I think China has lost its way, and I think it's tumbling down, unfortunately, which is a dangerous sign for the world because they're desperate, they're cornered, and that's where I am about China. But I am really the biggest fan of free trade with China you've ever seen. I'd like to do it militarily, make sure we're prepared, but I really think China is a wonderful country for trading with us. If that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Ignacio.
Professor, you talk about the great importance of free trade in investments and capital flows, which I fully agree. In that sense, I would like to ask you your view about the mode of the investment screening concept. Investment screening?
Investment screening.
Oh, investment screening, yeah.
Yeah, which can be seen as a kind of political tool of capital flows protectionism. Okay? There is a risk there. As a matter of fact, if you think in Chile, the so-called strategic sectors, which is the focus of the so-called investment screening, were all developed by foreigners. Okay? This is the case of telecoms, electricity, water supply, highways, and so on and so forth. And we never did the so-called investment screening there. So I think there is a risk of protectionism behind this idea in these critical aspects of free trading in capital flows. So I would like to hear your view on that.
Yeah. Let me just say that I can't defend every comment Trump's made. He makes one, he wants to have all this foreign investment in the U.S. and not have a trade deficit. As anyone who's an accountant knows, you can't do that. You know, if you move a factory from Mexico to Colorado, as it crosses the U.S. border, it becomes a U.S. import, a U.S. trade deficit. But he doesn't want a trade deficit, but he wants the factory. Well, my accounting is sufficiently correct to say you can't have both. I don't know how to explain the screening and that sort of stuff. I love it that foreigners move the capital to the U.S. I think it's great if they make higher rates of return. If they make lower rates of return, don't bring it to the U.S. If we make better rates of return investing in Chile than we do investing in the U.S., we should invest in Chile, not in the U.S. So that's where I would come out. I mean, I can't explain Trump's rhetoric, however.
Okay, and the very last question
Sure.
is the distribution of income is an issue in Chile.
Yeah.
And
Everywhere.
government spends a lot of money in different so-called social programs. And there is the idea of eventually eliminate all those programs and replace that with a negative income tax to give money directly to people instead of going through these programs with a lot of money leaks and keeps in the bureaucracy. I know that you are not very in favor of negative income taxes, but how would you solve the problem?
Yeah, let me forget. If any of you have a chance, 5 weeks ago, I was in Berkeley, California. I debated a guy named Emmanuel CIES. You may know who CIES is. He's the partner for Monsieur Thomas Piketty, Zuckerman, Sancheva, all of these people there. You should watch it. It's on YouTube. It's 2 hours long. They wanted me to do the debate for 45 minutes. I said I won't do that, but I will do it if it's 2 hours. I want him to be able to say everything he wants to say, and I want to be able to say everything I want to say. I want it so that the debate is too long, not too short. You all should go and watch that debate. It's on the wealth tax. It's on redistribution. I'll just do one thing with you on this, and this is called economics, not hand waving. Transfers. Looking at the distribution of income and transfers. A transfer occurs when you take resources from one person or one group and give it to another group. Let's say from tall people to short people. Let's say from young people to old people. Skinny people to fat people. I love it. But those are all transfers. But the way we normally think of transfers is we take it from those who have a little bit more and give it to those who have a little bit less. You with me? This is income inequality. As these people, oh my God, income inequality. And this is the way they go about solving it. Let me do the theorem, the transfer theorem. This is math. It has nothing to do with your politics, your height, or where you studied, or anything else. It's just plain math. They propose taking a little bit from those who have more, a little bit more, and giving it to those who have a little bit less. You with me? By taking from those who have a little bit more, you reduce their incentives to produce, and they will produce a little bit less, the substitution effects of the Slutsky equation. By giving to those who have a little bit less, you provide them with an alternative source of income other than working, and they too will produce a little bit less. That's the income effects of the Slutsky equation. All right, you with me? The theorem here is really simple. Whenever you redistribute income, you always reduce total income. Always. It's math. Now, the neat thing about this, there's a lemma from this theorem that I love, and I'll go through the lemma with you, again, verbally. And I'm not going to prove this one, I'm just going to describe it. The more you redistribute, the greater will be the reduction in total production. There, you see that intuitively. Now I want to describe the limit function of this theorem, because the limit function is beautiful, and God, I wish Bernie Sanders were sitting here, or Elizabeth Warren, or AOC, or any of these other Fabian socialists. I'd love to have one of them sit. If you were able to redistribute income so that everyone came out exactly the same, if you were able to do that, there will be no income whatsoever. Let me prove this to you verbally. In order to get everyone to come out exactly the same, what you would have to do is you'd have to tax everyone above the average income 100% of the excess. And everyone below the average income, subsidize them up to the average income. And only in this way can you guarantee that everyone would come out the exact same. Now, if you actually did do that, if you actually taxed everyone above the average income 100% of the excess, and if you actually did subsidize everyone below the average income up to the average income, I'll stipulate today, counselor, we'll all be equal, and it will be at zero. And that is the transfer. So now you understand why what we need to do on redistribution of income is remove barriers to the poor to become rich. We need to allow them to have the opportunity of becoming richer. We right now have a welfare system. The welfare system in the U.S. is the more you make, the less we give you. The less you make, the more we give you. A single woman in Philadelphia, law right now, a single woman in Philadelphia with 2 children, if she makes $29,000, her after-tax income plus the benefits that she gets from public welfare is the same size as if she made $58,000. The taxes are higher on her income, the welfare benefits are less. The net effect is she cannot be any higher in spending power making $58,000 than she is $29,000. That's 100% tax rate on the poor. That's what it is. That's what we need to remove. Make the poor richer. Don't make the rich poorer. If you look at the income tax, and I'll talk just the United States, there are 3 pages in the income tax codes that have to do with rates, and the rest of the 99 volumes is exemptions. All right, 99 volumes of exemptions. The income tax in the United States is a way of keeping the poor out of our country clubs. The poor don't know how to use lawyers. They don't know how to use accountants. They don't know how to use deferred income specialists. They don't know how to lobby politicians. They don't know how to buy off politicians. They do not. And that's the way the rich keep them from ever coming up. You need to have a low rate, flat tax that everyone has the same opportunities everywhere else. Remember, there's nothing wrong with being rich. There is something desperately wrong with being poor. The dream in this world is not to make the rich poor. The dream in this world is to make the poor rich. There's nothing wrong with privilege. There is something very wrong with the absence of privilege. The dream we need to do is give the privilege to the poor, not take it away from the others in the system. John F. Kennedy, one of my heroes, said it so beautifully, that no American is ever made better off by pulling a fellow American down. And we're all made better off if ever any one of us is made better off. A rising tide, it raises all boats. Balance up, guys. Don't balance down. Hate is not a good model. And I look at Zuckman, you go and watch my debate with CIES. Look at it. Look at what he says. The 4 guys who are going to pay $100 billion are all old white Jews. Hello? Excuse me? There's nothing wrong with them being rich. They did great products. If you look at this as the whole bill of attainder is just there. Everything that we fought for in America is being violated by these wealth taxes and by this stuff. You know, the dream is to balance. Make all the poor people billionaires. Don't make the rich people poverty-stricken. You know, you have a low rate flat tax. That's it. Your tax increases in increases in unrealized capital gains as income. That's the Haig-Simon definition of income. Do it. And if the income goes down, you reduce their taxes by the amount of capital losses they had that year. It's a low rate, broad-based flat tax run on Haig-Simon. Period. You know that. I know that. The North knows it. The South knows it. East knows it. Even MIT. Oh, he left. Just do it and get it done right. You know, it's just terrible the way these things are going. Watch my debate. If you would, please do watch my debate with Emmanuel Saez. You'll love it. He's very charming. We get along very well. He wants to work with me. The one comment I said, Emmanuel, you know on basis of economics I'm right on this. You know that. He said, yes, I do. You know, watch the debate and you'll see it. Civilized debate. We got along very well together. But you tell me what you think. This is the way it should be done. And I went to the place. Any of you speak French? I went to Le Ventre de la Bête, which is the womb of the beast. This is where Nosferatu was born, was in Berkeley, California. Beelzebub marched his way to Bethlehem, his term to be born came. You know, I was in Jarvis Hall, but it's right next to Sproul Hall, if any of you remember the days of the revolutions there, and Bettina Apteker and Mario Savio and all the days when I was there. I mean, go watch it. This is the way we should do. Don't hate your fellow members. You're all Chileans. If any one of you is better off, you're all better off. This is a dream to make everyone richer. That's why what was done in the 70s by Rolf Luders and Sergio de Castro and team, that's why you guys saved Chile. And you people have experienced the worst of the worst. And if you experience the best of the best, make your choices right. Go for it. It's heaven. There's only heaven and the stars to attain. That's it. Well, enough said.
Well,
thank you.
We are running out of time.
I hope that was okay.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Laffer. It was a privilege for us to have you in this conversation, and thank you for coming. And now we invite you to a coffee outside.